How are you guys doing? Today is Tuesday, December 13th, 2022. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an elite individual profile for Fletcher Cox. The elite defensive tackle for the Philadelphia Eagles turns 32 today, and my intention with this profile, of course, is to give you a good understanding of the type of player that Fletcher Cox is at this point in his career as he turns 32. As of right now, he is a six-time Pro Bowler. He is a Super Bowl champion after he would go on and help the Eagles win the championship following the 2017 season. He is a player that's made the first team All-Pro once, and he's made the second team All-Pro 3 times, making the All-Pro team 4 times in his career, making sure that people understand that it's not a fluke, that he's that good at his position. Not to mention that the team that he's on right now, the Eagles, are the only team in the NFL that have clinched the playoffs at this point. So I do think it's appropriate to give Fletcher Cox his profile, give him some praise, and of course give the Eagles some recognition for starting out their season 12-1. So of course, looking at Fletcher Cox before I get into his career, he stands at about 6'4", 310 pounds, standing in at defensive tackle. His main trait is that he consistently gets tackles, whether it be behind the line or just building up a certain amount of tackles and making sure that the Eagles' defensive line is really just doing what they need to do. The Eagles have been a very solid unit, especially with their defensive line, as long as Fletcher Cox has been there. And I do think that a 6-year stretch of being a Pro Bowler does deserve its own respect. And I imagine that he's probably going to be a Pro Bowler this year, but it hasn't been named as of right now. But I would guess that based on the Eagles' success, that Fletcher Cox is going to get some respect thrown his way this year. So, initially going into his backstory, he would be playing high school football in Yazoo City, Mississippi. He would establish himself as one of the better athletes in the state, as he was a top track and field athlete as well. He would go on and play for 3 years of college football at Mississippi State in Dan Mullen's first 3 seasons there, after he took over from Sylvester Croom. In Fletcher Cox's age 19 season as a freshman, he would play 12 games in a season where the Mississippi State Bulldogs would finish with a 5-7 record. They had one more win than the prior year. However, they would fail to make a bowl game. As a freshman in the SEC, he would put together 29 tackles with 3.5 tackles for loss, establishing himself as one of the better freshmen because, starting for an SEC team goes a long way. This would go into his second season at Mississippi State. His sophomore season, his age 20 season, would see him play all 12 games in a season where Mississippi State would go 9-4. They would have 4 more wins than the previous year. They would finish as a top 20 team in the nation, eventually going on to the Gator Bowl to beat Michigan 52-14 in that bowl game. So they were a pretty good Mississippi State team. His sophomore season would see Fletcher Cox finish with 29 total tackles on the year, just as many as he had his freshman year. He would finish with 6.5 tackles for loss, nearly double what he had the year before, as he would actually register 2.5 sacks compared to his freshman year where he didn't register a single one. He would also get his first forced fumble that year, as in 2010. He would return right after to finish his eligibility, as in his third and final year in Mississippi State in his age 21 season in 2011. Fletcher Cox would go on and play 12 games in a season where Mississippi State would go 7-6 in Dan Mullen's third season. They would win 2 less games than the prior year, but they would qualify for the Music City Bowl, where they would beat Wake Forest by 6 points. Fletcher Cox would finish with 56 tackles, which is double what he was able to do his prior 2 seasons. He was able to finish with a double-digit tackles for loss for the only season in his collegiate career, as his 5 sacks would double what he did his sophomore year. He would force a fumble and recover a fumble about 52 yards, and at the end of that 2011 season, he would make the first team All-SEC, and he would be named a first team All-American. Of course, foregoing his senior season of college football, he would enter the 2012 draft, where he would be taken with the 12th overall pick in the first round by the Philadelphia Eagles. He would be the second player at his position picked. He was picked right after Dontari Poe, after Dontari Poe was taken by the Kansas City Chiefs. This would be the draft where Andrew Luck was taken with the number 1 overall pick by the Colts, and then Heisman Trophy winner from the year before, Robert Griffin III, was drafted by Washington. After Fletcher Cox would be drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles. Of course, he has been a member of the Philadelphia Eagles for what is now going into 11 seasons. His first season with Philly would be his age 22 season in 2012. In that season, he would have to earn a starting spot, eventually starting midway. He would start 9 of the 15 games he played in a season where the Eagles would go 4-12. They had 4 less wins than the year before, and that would be their first 4-win season in the 21st century since 1998. So in that historic low season, which would see Andy Reid leave the organization right after, Fletcher Cox would finish with 39 combined tackles, with 5.5 sacks and a forced fumble while playing in the NFL against full-time veterans at the offensive line. Following his first year, he would make the all-rookie team. And after the Eagles would miss the playoffs, Fletcher Cox would return for his second season in Philly. In his age 23 season in 2013, he would start all 16 of the games he played for the first time there, in a season where the Eagles would finish with a 10-6 record in Chip Kelly's first year. They would have 6 more wins than the year prior. They would win the NFC East for the first time in 3 years. Fletcher Cox would finish with 41 tackles, which was 2 more than the prior year at the defensive end position because they had to move him out to the end. He would finish with a fumble recovery as he finished with 3 sacks, half as many sacks as he had the year prior. Following the 2013 season, once they would make the playoffs, the Eagles would end up losing in the wild card round to the Saints. In the end of the playoffs, the Seattle Seahawks would be the team representing the NFC in Super Bowl 48, where they would beat the Broncos by 5 touchdowns. This would lead into Fletcher Cox's 3rd season with Philly, and in his age 24 season, he would make his very first AP or All-Pro team. In year 3 in Philly, he would start all 16 of the games he played in a season where the Eagles would go 10-6. They had the same record as the year before. However, they would not qualify for the playoffs. This year, Fletcher Cox would finish with 61 tackles, breaking 60 tackles for the first time in his career, with 8 tackles for loss, just as many as he had his rookie year. He would go on and finish with a forced fumble. He would recover 3 fumbles. That would be his career high, as he did have a fumble recovery touchdown. His 4 sacks would be the second highest in his 3-year career at that time. And after making the All-Pro team, that would be the first time he would make the All-Pro team in his NFL career. Once the Eagles would miss the playoffs, Fletcher Cox would return for his 4th season in Philly for his first Pro Bowl season. In his 4th season there, in his age 25 season in 2015, Fletcher Cox would start all 16 of the games he played for the 3rd year in a row, in a season where the Eagles would go 7-9. This would be the season where Chip Kelly would get sacked before the end of the year, and Pat Shurmur would finish the season. They would have 3 less wins than the year prior, as in that season, Fletcher Cox would finish with 71 tackles. His 71 tackles in 2015 would be the most tackles that he would have in a season, by about 10 more than the previous year. He would not even register over 50 tackles in a season since 2015. He would finish with 11 tackles for loss. The first time in his career he would have a double digit of tackles for loss. He would go on and also finish with 3 forced fumbles, tied for the most he would have in his career. He would recover 2 fumbles as well. In addition to making his very first Pro Bowl, he would make it to the 2nd team All-Pro for the 2nd year in a row. Going into Fletcher Cox's fifth season in Philly in his second Pro Bowl season, in his age 26 season in 2016, he would start all 16 of the games he played for the fifth year in a row in a season where the Eagles would finish with a 7-9 record for the second year in a row. This would be Doug Peterson's first year in charge, as in 2016, Fletcher Cox would finish with 43 tackles, 28 less than the year prior. However, he would finish with 9 tackles for loss. He had 6.5 sacks as he would move back to the defensive tackle position. He would force a fumble and recover one. This would be the third year in a row that he would force a fumble, fourth in his first 5 years. He would recover a fumble for at least the fourth year in a row at that point in 2016. Once that season, of course, was finished, that would lead into Fletcher Cox's sixth season with the Philadelphia Eagles. In his age 27 season in 2017, he wouldn't go all 16 games. He would start all 14 of the games he played in a season where the Eagles would go 13-3. They would win the NFC East for the first time since 2013, his second year there, as they had 6 more wins than the year prior. This would be the year where Carson Wentz almost won the MVP, but then would get hurt, and Nick Foles would lead the team all the way to the Super Bowl. However, in the regular season, Fletcher Cox would be named to the second team All-Pro for the third time in a 4-year stretch, as he was named to the Pro Bowl for the third year in a row. His 26 tackles would be the least amount of tackles that he would ever put together in a season. He had 5 tackles for loss, which is just one higher than his career low. He would finish with a forced fumble. He had 2 fumble recoveries, and he did recover a fumble for a touchdown. He would have 5.5 sacks from the defensive tackle position. It would be 3 years in a row, and for the 4th time in his first 6 years, that he would record at least 5 sacks in a season. Once the 2017 regular season would end, the Eagles would end up beating the Falcons in the divisional round by 5 points, 15-10. In the NFC Championship, they would destroy the Vikings 38-7. And once they would make Super Bowl 52, they would end up beating the Patriots by 8 points. They won it 41-33. Fletcher Cox would record a tackle in the Super Bowl, and additionally, he would pick up a ring for the very first time in his NFL career. And to date, that is the only Super Bowl ring that he has won. And considering the team that the Eagles have this year, it may not be his only. Following that season, this would lead into Fletcher Cox's 7th season with the Philadelphia Eagles. His age 28 season in 2018 would see him start all 16 of the games he played for the 5th time in a 6-year stretch, as in 2018, following their Super Bowl win, they would finish with a 9-7 record. They had 4 less wins than the year prior, as this would be the year where Chris Long won the Walter Payton Man of the Year. They would qualify for the playoffs for the 2nd year in a row. In 2018, Fletcher Cox would make the first team All-Pro for the only time in his NFL career. This would be the 4th time in a 5-year stretch that he would make an All-Pro team as a defensive lineman, and this would be the 4th year in a row that he would make the Pro Bowl. That season, he would finish with 46 tackles. He would finish with 12 tackles for loss, which would be his career high. He would finish with a forced fumble and a fumble recovery, as his 10.5 sacks in 2018 would be the only season in his career that he would record a double-digit amount of sacks. Following the 2018 regular season, the Eagles would beat the Bears in the wild card round before they would lose to the Saints in the divisional round. In 2018, the LA Rams would represent the NFC in the Super Bowl 53, where they would lose to the Patriots by 10. This, of course, would lead into Fletcher Cox's 8th season with the Eagles and his 5th Pro Bowl season in 2019. In his age 29 season, he would start all 16 of the games he played yet again in a season where the Eagles would finish with a 9-7 record for the 2nd year in a row. However, they would win the NFC East for the 2nd time in a 3-year span and make the playoffs for the 3rd year in a row in Doug Peterson's 4th year. In 2019, Fletcher Cox would finish with 40 combined tackles on the year, as he had 5 tackles for loss, tied for the 2nd lowest he would have in a year. He would go on and finish with 3 forced fumbles, tied with 2015 for the most forced fumbles he would record in a season. He would recover a fumble as well, as he had 3.5 sacks. He would make the Pro Bowl for the 5th year in a row, and to wrap up the 2019 season, he would go on and make the 2010s All-Decade Team. Once the Eagles would make the playoffs, they would lose in the very first game in the wild card to the Seahawks. The 49ers would be the team that came out of the NFC that year, as they lost in Super Bowl 54 to the Kansas City Chiefs. Taking a look at how this would transition into Fletcher Cox's 9th season with Philly, this 2020 season would be remembered as the season where COVID would not allow fans to attend the games. However, teams were still able to play their 16-game seasons with COVID restrictions abided. In his 9th season with the Philadelphia Eagles organization, Fletcher Cox would start all 15 of the games he played in a season where the Eagles would go 4-11-1. They would have 5 less wins than the year prior, and that would be the last full season that Doug Peterson would coach the Eagles. That 2020 season would see Fletcher Cox make it to his 6th consecutive Pro Bowl, and the last one he's made to date. He would finish with 41 tackles on the year. He would finish with 9 tackles for loss, the 3rd highest in his career. He would go on and also finish with a forced fumble, as he finished with 6.5 sacks. Following the 2020 season, the Philadelphia Eagles, of course, would not make the playoffs, and Fletcher Cox would return to the Philadelphia Eagles for his 10th year with the organization to round out his first decade in the league. In his age 31 season in 2021, he would start all 16 of the games he played for an Eagles team that would go 9-8 in the first season, where the NFL would extend its schedule to 17 games. In that 2021 season, Fletcher Cox would miss the Pro Bowl for the first time since 2014, ending a 6-year streak. He would finish with 35 tackles, the least amount of tackles he would have in a season since 2017. He would go on and also finish with 7 tackles for a loss, as he had 2 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, a scoop and score touchdown, the most recent he scored in his career, and he would finish with 3.5 sacks. And once the Eagles season was over, they would lose in the wild card round to the Buccaneers, as the team that would represent the NFC last year would be the Rams, as they won Super Bowl 56 in their home stadium of SoFi. That now leads us to Fletcher Cox's 11th season in the NFL, starting out his 2nd decade possibly. As in the 13 games he's played so far, of course, all of them have been starts. The Philadelphia Eagles so far are holding the best record in the NFL. Sitting at 12-1, they are the only team, though, so far that have clinched a playoff spot, a playoff berth, as they are holding on to a 4-game winning streak. So far this season, it looks like Fletcher Cox is putting up statistical numbers that are similar to his past Pro Bowl seasons. So far, he has 37 tackles, more than he's had on full seasons, with 4 games left in his schedule. He would go on and finish with 6 tackles for loss. He has 1 forced fumble and a fumble recovery this year, and his 6 sacks are above what would be his career average at this point. So Fletcher Cox is having an amazing year, and the Philadelphia Eagles are having an amazing year as well. And we now know for sure that they are going to be competing in the playoffs for the Super Bowl this year. So of course, the best of luck to the Eagles. And of course, I know that as long as they have Fletcher Cox playing at his best, they don't have to worry about what he's doing. But with that said, I want to thank everyone for listening. I hope all is well, and I will catch you with more tomorrow, as I do have a profile after this. Happy 32nd birthday to Fletcher Cox. He wears number 91 for the Philadelphia Eagles. And of course, go Birds. I hope all is well, and peace out. I'll catch you with more tomorrow.